When most people talk about getting their private pilot's license, they all say something along these lines. You're going to need $15,000 to $20,000 to get your private pilot certificate. But that's only true if you follow the traditional path. Today I want to show you how to get your private pilot certificate for as little as $7,500. And I'm going to break down every dollar spent line by line. So if you've been waiting for the right time to start flying, this video may save you thousands of dollars in a few months of your life. Are you ready? Let's dive into it. Before we dive into the budget that I want to share with you in this video, let's make sure that we first have a clear understanding of what is required by the FAA. First, let's talk minimum hours. So if you're training at a Part 61 school, you're going to be required to have at least 40 hours. If you're training at a Part 141 school, which I don't recommend, it drops to 35 hours. So let's just call it 40 hours. Of these 40 hours, at least 20 of them are going to need to be with a flight instructor, and the remainder are going to be solo hours. So with that said, the reality, according to the FAA, is that most students need to get somewhere between 60 and 75 hours before they're proficient enough for their check ride. So if you assume, say, 30 hours with an instructor that's $75 an hour, that comes out to $2,250 for flight instruction. And then if you assume the same 60 hours at $195 an hour for aircraft rental, that comes out to around $11,700 for a total of just shy of $14,000. On top of that, you can add $300 for an online ground school, $800 for a check ride, maybe more depending upon what market you're in, approximately $150 for your medical certificate, and $175 for the FAA written exam fee. And now the total for the average student requiring 60 hours of training is around $15,400. Just call it 15 grand. But what if I told you you could do it for half of that amount? To make that happen, there are two very important things that you must do that the average student does not do. So the first thing you need to do is buy your own aircraft instead of renting one. Anytime you're renting, you are contributing to somebody else's profit margin because nobody rents aircraft to just break even. In terms of buying an aircraft, you can get a used light sport aircraft for somewhere between $80,000 and $100,000 at the time that I recorded this video. And that'll give you a payment, including your insurance, of somewhere around $1,000 per month, assuming you put 20 or 25% down, which is typical. Now, light sports are very fuel efficient, and the engines cost much less to rebuild than your typical certified aircraft. So you can expect to spend somewhere around $90 an hour all in as your operating cost as the owner of a light sport. And according to my fancy finger calculator here, $90 an hour is a whole lot less than $195 an hour to rent. Now, some of you might object saying, well, hey, Trent, that's great, but I'd have to put $20,000 down to buy a $100,000 plane. And yes, that's true, but the $100,000 that you're putting down, it's not really an expense. Instead, it's an investment. And this is money that you're going to get back when you go ahead and sell the airplane. And that might not be for a while, as I'll explain later in this video. And the good news is about used airplanes is that unlike used cars, used airplanes tend to appreciate instead of depreciating like a used car. So it's actually not a bad investment at all. So in addition to owning your own aircraft, the next thing that you need to do to come in at the $7,500 budget is to become proficient in the minimum amount of hours that are required by the FAA. In other words, just the 40 hours. Now you might be thinking, well, how on earth am I going to be able to become proficient in 40 hours when the FAA says the average is 60 to 75? Stick with me. So step number one is to make sure that you are practicing extensively using Microsoft Flight Simulator. Microsoft Flight Simulator is a highly realistic sales trainer, or a flight trainer rather, sales trainer, and it will allow you to practice virtually anything that you want to as many times as you want to prior to getting into the real aircraft. So when you take this approach, you can spend all that time learning at your desk instead of learning in the much more expensive cockpit. And as you might imagine, That will save you a significant amount of money. Now, step number 2 is to train on a full-time basis and fly 5 to 6 days per week instead of what the average student does, which is only 1 to 3 times per week. So this is what I did. And the reality is, the more often that you fly, the less you are going to forget between your flights. And that means the less relearning that you have to do. Now, that can really add up. This is what I call accelerated flight training, which makes it sound fancy, but the reality is it just means that you're flying more often. Doesn't mean you're cutting any corners and you're not compromising safety. So when you're flying nearly every single day, like I did, that means your instructor won't have to spend the first 20 or 30 minutes of today's flight reviewing what you did in your flight, say, 3 days ago. Now multiply that by 20 to 30 lessons, and that is thousands of dollars saved. Now, step number 3 is to choose the right flight school. Now, there's a lot of things that go into choosing the right flight school, and that's beyond the scope of this video, but I'm going to talk about what is particularly relevant to the budget. If you do want to learn about all of the factors for choosing a right flight school, check out my product called The Guide to Accelerated Flight Training. There's a link down in the comments. So what is choosing the right flight school? How does that affect your budget? Well, there's a couple of things that you need to think about. Number 1 is you need to pick a school in a small town. Now, schools in small towns typically are less expensive than schools in large cities. Number 1, because the land's cheaper, the cost of living's cheaper. There's just a whole bunch of stuff that's cheaper. But that's not actually where the savings comes in. The savings comes in this, what I'm about to explain next. So you've got a couple of factors that can really add things up. Number 1 is you want as short a commute as possible to your practice area. So for example, if you're flying at a busy airport, you might have to sit in line waiting for your turn to take off, 4, 5, 6 planes in front of you. That wastes money. Then if you have to fly 30 minutes out to your practice area, so you can do your maneuvers and so forth, and 30 minutes back to the airport, that's 30 minutes and 30 minutes of really wasted money because you're not becoming proficient at any of the maneuvers while you're just flying straight and level. So you want to make sure that you're not having to do that. And then you also want to make sure that if the airport's busy, when you come back to the airport, you might actually have to wait to land the aircraft as well, and that wastes even more money. So when I did my flight training, I did exactly what I'm explaining to you. I chose a flight school that was located at a tiny little airport in the middle of nowhere, and that meant absolutely no time was wasted waiting for my turn to take off, commuting to or from the practice area, or waiting to land because there was too many planes ahead of me. Boise is another perfect example of this. When you take off out of Caldwell, you're in a practice area literally in like 3.5 minutes from leaving the airport. So as you might imagine, that can add up to be a significant amount of money over time. So now let's summarize the budget of this new, more efficient training approach. Assuming that you are a relatively quick learner and you can become proficient in the minimum of 40 hours, which is what I did, at $90 per hour in aircraft rental, you'll have a total cost of $3,600 for aircraft rental instead of $11,700. That's a pretty big savings. And if you only require 20 hours of instruction, like I did, at an instructor rate of say $75 per hour versus maybe $90 or $100 per hour in a larger market, you're going to be spending only $1,500 on instruction versus maybe $2,200 up to as maybe $3,000 on flight instruction. So when you add the cost of your examiner fee, your medical certificate, your written exam, and your check ride, you're looking at just over $7,000 in total. Now, if you're like most people who are watching videos on my channel, your goal is probably to become a professional pilot. And that means that you're going to do a lot more training beyond your private pilot certificate. And that's where owning an aircraft is going to pay even greater dividends. Let's talk about this a little bit more. So to become a commercial pilot, you need 250 hours. That's the minimum required by the FAA. By owning your own aircraft, you're going to save about $100 an hour. So that adds up to a $25,000 savings over the 250 hours. That's almost a quarter of the price of the plane that you're going to buy, and it's definitely going to cover the down payment that you put down. So a lot of the training for a commercial certificate is just solo flying once you've got your instrument rating. And most students are doing this in a rental aircraft, and they're probably not splitting the time with somebody else for a variety of reasons. Maybe because they don't have control over the schedule of that aircraft, maybe because it's difficult to coordinate with another student. I don't know what the reasons are, but a lot of people are doing this on their own. So by owning your own aircraft, not only are you going to realize the significant hourly savings that I discussed, but you can also amplify the savings by splitting your time with another student pilot and having them act as a safety pilot for you, you act as a safety pilot for them. And then once you get your commercial pilot certificate and become a flight instructor, owning your own airplane is going to be beneficial for you yet again. For example, when I was a flight instructor, I worked as an independent instructor and I charged $75 an hour for instruction. In a typical day, we'd fly 8 hours. I would bill for 9 hours because there was other stuff we're talking about before and after we're flying. So that came in at a total of $675 per day in instructor fees. Now, had I owned my own aircraft, I would have been able to add another $50 to $60 per hour in profit, because I could have easily made my student rent my light sport for, say, $140 an hour. My cost is $90 an hour. So now I've got a $50 per hour profit on the operation of the aircraft. So that would have added approximately, if I'm flying 8 hours a day, which I was, another $400 a day to my earnings. It really adds up. So hopefully by now you're starting to realize that owning your own aircraft can actually be an absolutely fantastic investment for you to make. So thanks very much for watching. If you have questions, comments, or a point of view, please do leave them down in the comments below because I read them all. If you'd like to get a copy of my Fast Track Training Blueprint, please visit flywithtrent.com. And finally, if you enjoyed this video, please smash the like button and also consider subscribing to the channel because it makes a huge difference. Thanks very much. My name is Trent. I'll see you in the next video soon. Take care. Bye-bye.